but we're focused in a kind of, constricted dimensional awareness of reality. And, for safety reasons mostly, and we don't necessarily want to know that we are actual one consciousness with all beings and things at all times. So, nevertheless, those dimensions are all open to our being. We have a complete freedom of the continuum of being.
I have a very delightful opportunity just talking about cactus, which is, no plants and small song. Real dense saying, you've seen 3,028,000 species in the world. That sounds like small. No, okay. You can also demand an apology down ahead of time. There are so many names of genera and species and varieties and people and compounds and so forth that I must need a little touch of what I usually call senior moments, in which I know exactly the species I have in mind, but I somehow can't quite get from up here up. I was listening to the radio about a week ago, and I heard a person discuss senior moments, but he used the term brain fart, which I'd never heard before. And so I will try to avoid them under any name that they will occasionally have. Also, right now I'd like to talk about some of my recent work with cactus, and where it started and how it's going now, and why I'm going to pretty soon sort of say, I don't know if it's really worth the push. And that it's an interesting evolution into getting back into synthetic chemistry again, where the real magic is. Actually, one of my first talks on cactus was down in Palenque a year or two ago. Okay, I talked about a cactus that I've been doing some work with. In fact, the introduction of that cactus into our Western culture came at the first United States meeting in Berkeley, 4 years ago, perhaps 3 or 4 years ago. And which they were offering for sale in the inside of the International House. And this the cactus has the genus name of Lobelia, which I really was taken with. It is a cactus, and I love playing around with words. And so if you take the first and the third letter of Lobelia, you get them out with Bolivia. And that's where the cactus grows. So I can't see a botanist who has that kind of sense of humor not having a cactus maybe pharmacologically active also. And indeed it is. They are selling it at the Mind State, and I was quite interested in seeing what's in it. It's never been analyzed. So I had this, they gave me a few samples, the red blossom, the yellow blossom, the white blossom, Lobelia. Lobelia grandiflorus, that's the species I remember. And they said it is, they're all three colored blossoms, cacti are active, but the red is most interesting. Okay, my red died almost immediately, but I had the yellow and white, so I ripped them up and looked at what was in them. At the Palenque meeting where I was talking about this, I was talking a little bit about, the usual things like chromatography, gas chromatography, mass spec, the usual things I know you're familiar with. So what I was doing there was giving some sort of a report on what I had found in them, and this person came up to me. Well, I was really approach another way. I was sort of working on the farm where I live about 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks ago, and I have a little whistle, like something to detect for the FBI, what's the other, DEA comes visiting. I get this little horn that says, like that, so I know someone's driving up the driveway, and usually someone has a wrong address, but the horn went off, and I went out to meet this fellow, and there's a person in a little pickup truck. He is, I put at 32, 34, sort of 40 dress, a little bit thin, and it says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I'd like to have 50 cents for every time someone has come up to me and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" No, I mean, I met you down at Palenque, you said, 4 years ago, and that's what you're working on, and you mentioned Lobelia grandiflorus. So what I did, I wrote to a person who sells cactus seeds, cacti. Who said cactuses? Who said cactuses? There's three plurals to cactus like octopus. There are three plurals to octopus. You have cactus, cacti, and cactuses, all plural, hence. Octus, octopus, octopi, and activities. But that's another collection. I said grandiflorus, the Lobelia grandiflorus, and I got a collection of maybe 100 or so seeds from this German cactus seed salesman, and I got 100 little black pots, and I put a seed in each pot and watered them, a little bit of fluid. And that was 4 years ago. In the back of my truck, I have about 55 Lobelia grandiflorus, which I raised from seed. They're yours. Did you want them? And the next thing I know, I have 55 little containers with about the size of grapefruit of these beautiful cacti. They're all spherical, and they're all presumably of the same. So one of them was actually blooming. It was a red blossom plant. It was very festive. And he said, "Thanks for driving away." That was it. I finally got his name and his number. He lives somewhere up near Fort Washington, California. But he doesn't want to run away. So I got a good friend of mine who doesn't mind putting out a little bit of labor for a small amount of money. And he planted all these up inside the inner gate up there and watered and fertilized them. So I now have a little bed of these lobelia. I have now with another friend of mine in San Francisco had all of his cactus in his neighbor's backyard. And he was told about 6 or 8 months ago by his neighbor. He said, "I'm going to do something else in my backyard. Would you take these things out, please?" So I got a call from him that said, "Do you mind a few cactus if I move out to your farm?" I said, "Sure, bring them on." I now have, I'd say, 300, 400 cacti growing on the farm. Some of them 3, 4 feet tall, all kinds of species would not believe. Many of the Trichocereus, but some of them not. And they were all planted thanks to a lot of help. Thank you, fire. Thank you, earth out there, digging holes and putting in all the chips and all that kind of thing. Then another friend came by after sort of the 4th of July and said, "I've got a lot of extra plumbing and tubing and little electronic devices that make water run and not run. Do you mind, Harry, if I would just install a dripping system on all your cacti?" So now I have a big barn, probably about 75 cactus of various sorts. A valley by valley, one of those where we used to have a vegetable garden, probably another 150. Down below the patio, probably another 75. And a greenhouse filled with retainers just in case we have a sudden frost. And the place is looking something like a desert in Mexico. But it's quite intriguing. I have this Lobelia grandiflorus, and I have a friend who is up in Washington State who is a botanist of great renown. Came down and said, "Oh, hey, that's a neat Trichocereus." I said, "No, it's a Lobelia." No. It's a Trichocereus grandiflorus. Okay, so I jotted down in my notebook Trichocereus grandiflorus. Then another friend of mine lived down in LA. He's the head of there's a botanical curators. What is Jim Bonner? He's head of some big. Yeah. And he came and said, "Hey, that's kind of neat cactus. You know its name?" I said, "Yeah, it's I think Lobelia, maybe Trichocereus grandiflorus." No. His name is Trichocereus lobelia. And you're taking the genus over here and jam the funny thing on the word over here and made it into a species. So here I got this marvelous book published in England on all the common, or not even so common, genera and all the little species that go along with them. So I'm looking in there under Trichocereus. And they said the name Trichocereus doesn't exist anymore. It's now known, what is it, like, Echinopsis. So I had this fantasy of getting maybe well-known internationally headed departments botanists all together in a little party and took a cactus in between them and just stand back and listen to how they argue for territory, ego, whatever it is, so they can dictate names to cactus. I think primarily so they can put a journal out and send a journal with living majorities or something rather like that, as it used to know. And that way they get tenure and they get a position on the faculty on botany. And it's not fair to say in botany. I think the same applies to astronomy, to physics, to chemistry, to psychology. All the academic departments have these structures of trying to find that their way is the best way of identifying things. So the first of the problems I want to get into, and I'll get to it in a few minutes before dinner, is the argument of how you know what a cactus is called.
Excuse me, Sasha. Is that cactus called locally compared to
No. So that's it. No. San Pedro. That's not into itself. I've always called it pactinoid. I've been corrected. It's pactinoid, Pachycereus pactinoid. Except there are varieties. You have long spine Pachycereus pactinoid, which are the San Pedro, presumably, which are not that dissimilar from the short spine Pachycereus pluvialis. And of course, if you have short spine pluvialis, long spine pactinoid, you can't tell them from the Pachycereus. What was the name of the other thing? Somebody's giant. You know, the Crown Jewel giant, Crown Jewel giant, yes. And then you have the Crown Jewel giant, Crown Jewel giant, but I couldn't tell any of them from any of the others. I found the Jewel giant Pachycereus are known as vanilla and non-vanilla, which I took a little bit of searching out. When the blossoms bloom, some of the blossoms go out like vanilla, and some of them have me smell wrong. And so you have a subspecies of this. I'm not interested in what they look like, but they look like, and here's what's in them. And I don't know if I get the same cactus way. I was told, wait until the cactus puts out what the cost is. You know, down the bottom of the cactus, all the way around the bottom. These are, sort of, you might say, physical reproductions of the original cactuses. It could have the same gene, what have you, or it should be the same. So I like the idea of saving them in my greenhouse as a retainer sample for what I had looked at in the laboratory. And you look at some of those cups, and every now and then, third or fourth cup around things looks totally different. You have what they call monstroses, which I just discovered the word of. It's a nice way of saying monster. And these are cacti that just they call them monstroses. Then you have crystoses, which means that in my nice way of saying crested. The cactus doesn't go up like that, it goes up like this. It has a like an edge up at the top. And so I began looking at some of these I'm not even going to get into the San Pedro, but I should. Different compositions. You think you have a cactus and you have a variety of vegetative offshoots in that cactus, they should all be the same. Don't kid yourself. Some of them are contained, for example, I was told that the macrogonus, which is something I talked about up in Canada. I love cactus, the species is the Pachycereus macrogonus. Large corners. Why cacti can have large corners, I don't know, but they call them macrogonus. They're perfectly fine. And it's just active. I asked the person who's the source of my first 50 examples of that, and so, yes, by and large. I say, well, how do you mean by and large? Well, sometimes they are extremely active, but sometimes you seem they have no action at all. This is the kind of thing I'm trying to fight through in determining why cacti are active, and I can't even find that they're active. So this whole thing gets me out of the Pachycereus, I guess would be the Oides, whatever it is. And I want to talk about another cactus, which I've gotten very interested in, and that is not a Pachycereus, but it's a Primlii Pachycereus. It's a cactus a good friend of mine found, brought up into my reality. He is a collector of cave drawings and secret businesses inside of nice things. And you go about halfway down to the bottom of Baja California, on the East Coast, there's an area where there's an Indian tribe who lived there in that area. They now went over to the mainland about 200 years ago. But they have paintings inside of the caves there. He got permission to go in, he loved the idea of paintings, took pictures of paintings. And one of the paintings had obviously a religious chief or maybe a god or something. And the guy had a pen like this, and he had a pen like that. It was a marvelous painting of an Indian holding his hands like that. And he says, hey, that's not an Indian, that's a cactus. And then he went all around everywhere in the cave are these Pachycereus Primlii growing. And so this must be a religious cactus. So, being a good adventurer, he goes out and cuts down a few of them, boils them up in a pan with a little bit of lemon juice, and he and his wife consume them and turn on like you wouldn't believe. So I decided, what is making a Pachycereus Primlii? You look in the literature, they have about 4 compounds known to be up. And so I got this from him. And, I did I mention one more thing about the BBOs. I talked about that. That's an interesting little aside. That it came up because someone was talking about the law, I think it was Johnson. I found in a very small peak inside of the Levivioides, probably constituting a trace component that had the empirical formula methylene oxide, phenethylamine. I don't worry about the details. I had a word drawn up. So here is a material that's known, but hadn't been found in the cactus before. It just might be an active compound. And so I'm really carefully documenting its mass spec and synthesize the compound to make sure that we're okay. The retention time of the sample is exactly the same. This is a good encouragement for mass spec. But the ratio between the primary peak and the parent peak was just slightly different. So we often have the same empirical formula. I snoop around a little bit. You have the same empirical formula as MDMA. And so if you put a methyl group oxidized and stuck it on the alpha position, you'd have MDMA, same mass spec approximately. And so I just happened to scrape a little trace amount of MDMA together. And things like MDMA, I think. So all of a sudden, they're always saying that I'm a firm believer in, if you've made a modern discovery, wait until tomorrow morning before you publish. Believe that, saved my ass many times. So how can I find a little bit of MDMA in a cactus that grows down in Baja California on the eastern coast, halfway down to the bottom of the peninsula? Well, I have not actually made MDMA in my laboratory for probably 15 years. But I can safely have had and drink a speaker, as you know. So I have a really good friend who is marvelous at hydroponics. And so we're making a sample of this cactus in hydroponics using nitrogen 15 nitrate only. And we can get that same thing and get that same peak that has N15 in it, then it has to be biologically synthesized. Very interesting. Don't know the answer, probably won't know for a year. But these are the kind of things that are talk about MDMA. This brought up the other discussion just a little while ago about the regional law. I eventually, I should tell you, I have what I call little red flags. And when I worked at Sturch University, I love doing it. These red flags are totally invisible to anyone from me. I know where they are. I can see them, no one else can. So I'm walking along, and suddenly I leave my path of my lecture. I put a little red flag in the path. That way I go off the side, go up the wall, go across the wall, on the ceiling, back down again. You can tell he's lost the side. I hear that flag, I come back, I pick up my, and go up my side. So I'm just taking a little bit aside, out and back, same place. For example, mention was made about MDMA. Someone was talking about the Cacti edulus. Coming this morning, I guess, from Cacti edulus, the source of cacti. There are 4 plants that are listed in the federal drug law as being illegal. You have peyote under the name of the Amelonia levinii, or whatever they call it. You have the THC or the mescaline the marijuana plant under the appropriate several appropriate names. You have under Schedule 2, you have the cocaine plant, and you have the opium plant. These are the 4 plants that are mentioned in the law as originally written. There are 2 more plants that have been added to the law illegally, and one of them is Cacti edulus. They were putting cat under the Schedule 1. And they went through the whole necessary thing of going through 12 months of posting a federal register, holding hearings, all that. At the end of 12 months, emergency scheduling. At the end of 12 months, you say, we'll take a 6-month extension. At the end of 5.9 months of that 6-month extension, they say, no more arguments, it's now illegal. So it's about 18 months and a few days to put the sample into the drug law. This is the illegal law to do it. With the Cacti edulus, the cat plant, they went through the whole federal register thing with the name of the compound. And in there, the very last posting after the 17.9 months thing, they said this compound is now Schedule 1, and of course, because of our history of doing this, so is the plant. It never was mentioned in any of the federal registers up prior to the very last posting. I'm not trying to leave it in there. You have another one in Schedule 1, you have ibogaine. Ibogaine matter. In 1970, the law was written, and ibogaine was spelled out as being Schedule 1. At that time, there was no DEA. At this point, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, BNED, sent out a notice to all the people around everywhere, industry, academic, what have you. This is the way we intend to write up the federal drug law, using these spellings and using this organization. Give us your opinions. And the business came in 1971. They printed up the one with the new correct spellings and all that. And under title gain, they had to volunteer the name Iboga Tabernacle. It did not meet the necessary 17.9 limits. So I don't think that is illegal. You have another two others that are actually fascinating. One of them is MDMA. In 1985, emergency scheduling, MDMA was proposed for scheduling. It had 12 months plus the almost 6 months of the second thing, and they made it Schedule 1. That was the end of the issue. In 1988, a lawsuit was brought by Lester Grimspoon back in Harvard that they hadn't done this, hadn't done that, they should have done this, and should have done that, and the judge said, okay, you're right, take it out of Schedule 1. So on roughly, I guess, give me take a month or two, January of 1988, it was removed from Schedule 1. And then roughly, next month, February of 1988, it was put back in. So at that point, ICE should not have been in before because it had not met these legal requirements. So anyone who's arrested for MDMA between 1985 and 1988 has a definite argument for having that penalty thrown out because it was technically not illegal. But when they put the thing back in again, they just cut it for 18 months. They just said, we just make it illegal. Put it illegal again. I don't think MDMA is today illegal. But if you want to fight a battle, I suggest you get a lot of money behind it because it's going to be a long, hard battle. Hey, that was one of the other compounds I'm going to talk about. Oh yes, the other one is people say that methamphetamine is Schedule 2. I suggest you get a sample of the 1970 listing of scheduled drugs and the 1971 listing of scheduled drugs. You may have to go to a library somewhere to get them. And you'll find in 1970, injectable MDMA is Schedule 2. But otherwise, injectable methamphetamine is Schedule 2. But other than that, methamphetamine is Schedule 3. In 1971, they just everything was Schedule 2. Not going through the procedure. So I think if you are nailed with a heavy penalty for normal methamphetamine, you may want to get a very expensive lawyer and a lot of money, and you may be able to constitute the throwing out of methamphetamine as a Schedule 2 drug. Interesting idea. Just toss it in there and let it circulate. Okay. It's very simple like that. What my friend did, he pulled up from he and his wife had cooked up whole batch of this stuff by the pot in the stove, boil it down, squeeze it out, decant it, put it in a little vial. And we went up into the area near Auburn in California for a number of people who are interested in this general area of research. Almost every small town in the United States, you'll find a number of people who are interested in that research. And we sat around one at each point of the compass, and there were 12 of us, and we poured out these 4 vials, 3 here, 3 here, 3 over here, 3 over here, and you were up there, you remember these incidents. And after having cast blessings to the various points of the compass and had said their various religious things, necessary to say we all died, our extracts of the practitioners mainly died. Interesting experience, very definitely psychedelic. A little bit on the light side. What it is, my personal experience was I was sitting in a theater, a strange theater, and I was looking at the stage, and there was activity on the stage, but the damn curtain had not been opened yet. And I worked for about a half an hour trying to get that damn curtain open, because I wanted to see what's going on the stage. I couldn't wait. I just couldn't get that concept open. And then people saw what they saw, but I couldn't see it. About 3 months later, he brought up another sample, boiled up the same way, and we went up to the same place, and we had another religious ceremony. We all took, I think with good fortune, both Al and I took the same amount we took before, just to be sure that everything was going to be all right. And of the 12 people, 6 totally of 2 of the violence, 6 of us came down viciously for it. And the other 6 had a smart script. All for the same boiling, all for the same cacti or mixture of cacti, I don't know which. And my case, I could not move. I managed somehow to work myself onto a bed downstairs, and I just lay still. I know if I wiggle my toe, I'm in trouble. I lay still for about 20 minutes, and eventually I began feeling safe to move again. And you had some sticks who were very ill, had diarrhea, and he locked himself in that one bathroom for the couple of 3 hours. The experiment happened to be a microbiologist, And he took a sample back to see if he could raise some sort of a growth in this, as not in that, maybe as an endotoxin from some bug. And I took samples from the good and the bad for GCMSing to see if there's some component in the bad that was not in the good, or vice versa. Neither of us found 1/10 of what was going on. To this day, I do not know why 6 of us were religiously ill and 6 of us had good hair. So it gives you a little bit of, so that caught my fancy. And we go into finding out what is in the cactus, what is in there. The literature gives 4 compounds that are interesting. But I what I did, how many people here have tried a piece of food? 1 Well, okay, that's how many people are at peace with gas liquid chromatography, HPLC, gas liquid chromatography? 1, 2, 3. The first page is what happens when I took a little smudge of this cactus extract and dissolved it in 97 butanol, butanol, and put it in a deep chromatography. In essence, it's like you spill some butter on your t-shirt, and you want to wash it off. And you wash it off a little bit of gasoline or hexane. As you wash the hexane off, the butter moves down the shirt in its own slow pace. If you had a margarine or something else, the product moves at a slightly different pace. So if you had a mixture on your shirt of margarine and butter and used gasoline, you could separate the two as they went down the shirt. This is chromatography. Now, okay, I could have picked it better than that. Recently, in 1920 something or other, I forget his name, that was something like this in Germany. Everyone knew what chlorophyll was. It's the green stuff that makes plants green. And he made a solution of chloroform and made up some ground up sand, I think it was. And poured this solution, got the solution sand all wet with some salt or other, and put this chlorophyll on top of the thing, and added more of the solvent, and the chlorophyll moved down into this drop glass column. And it went down, separating into 4 bands. And he collected first, the second came off, and more, third came off. He identified chlorophyll as being a mixture of 4 compounds by using ground sand and a solvent. This is the very first of chromatography. This isn't because it's purple green, that's why it's called chromatography. But that's back in the 20s. So this is now down to a very sophisticated thing. The advanced chromatographic system I use here has a temporary column made of quartz that is about 30 or 40 feet long in a spiral like this. It is so fine internally you cannot put a human hair into it. It's about a 10th the diameter of human hair. And it's coated on the inside with a material that is really bound to the quartz. So when you inject something hot in there, the gas moves through this whole thing, and this thing moves much more than the gas. You need to move with the gas, which is moving, but also when you go here to the outside surface that is not moving, and the more volatile the sooner it moves, faster it moves, the more less volatile it is, the more slowly it moves. And so when you put the disc in the front, it runs through this long thing, and after about 4 or 5 minutes, something begins coming out the tail end, then something else comes out, then something else comes out. So this is a form of gas chromatography. I'm separating things by means of a long silica spine into its various components. Then you have mass spec. How many of these is mass spec? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's so tricky on mass spec when you wait for it. I think the best way I can tell it is when you take molecules, there's a bunch of atoms all put together, and they're all bonded together. Every bond has a couple electrons in it. So you have however many atoms you have an even number of electron bonds. So it's 28 electrons to 30 electrons, 32 electrons. And you go and pack this thing with a very, very energetic electron, not electron bonds. So suddenly you have a molecule with an odd number of electrons. And it can't stay together, it falls apart. And as it falls apart in fragments that are different degrees of stability, different sizes, and this is fragmentation, not that. So if I have this strip coming out of the column over here, and coming to an area where I can put a vacuum there and hit it with a hot electron, and let the strip be accelerated down a little, some sort of a thing that accelerates things. And it goes down this way, and at the right end you have a large piece of film. So they have a big gas sitting down here. And all these things are coming through, and the more massive they are, the less they're distracted by the magnet. So if you can go massive, go near a room like that. So you can't like go near a down there. You develop the film, this is the 1960s for advanced spectrum. You develop this film, and you got the light things down there, and everything's up there, and you can tell what the mass is of those fragments. Like there is on it. So second, you break the molecule apart into little bitty things, and you can measure the noise and the blast of those little bitty things by means of magnetic resonance. Then you have what's called you have four little lines of the RF field going around the detector over here. There's further stuff in this thing that goes into the magnetic field, and it finds into the detector, and you vary the RF in this field, and faster, whatever, lower, slower, slower. And then the light come out first, the heavy come out later, and the very heavy out later. This whole thing takes about a third of a second to give you a complete second. So every 30 seconds, 3 times a second, you get all of these mass specs coming out. And then you have this machine, listed on computers, hopefully, that can take all these little things coming out. And only because while it's coming out, you get a deflection of the pen up like that. Not much coming out, but much deflection. So something comes out, and you get thump, 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 thump. Each of these, every 30 seconds, you get another thing. So you can see the amount of material and its retention time by plotting the total mass of what's coming out. But every single 30 seconds, you have a complete spectrum of what's coming out, and in the computer, you can bring out the spectrum. So you want to even tell what comes out in what order, and what's separated, what's made, what's mixed, what's separated, what's not separated. But what you can tell is what's the mass and what arrangement is on each of the fragments. So not only do you know where the mixture is in the sense of resolving it, but you know, have a good insight of what the materials might be that are in that mixture. Okay, so now the first of the pictures is what happened when I put that little extract. This is not the poisonous one, not the non-poisonous. This is the first of the ones about 3 months earlier. I have a little smudge in there, and you can see there's a nice little peak, and then a being spun down to the first of the thing, and a total of about 8 or 10 peaks. And notice the middle peak of this one, this middle peak, is quite a big monster. That is the major component of this cacti. The second picture, I took that little section of these materials coming banging out there and blew it up horizontally. The computer just turn it out, stretch it out, these things. And this is a picture of those things. Now you see that big peak is little monster, which is so big it's worse. But all the little peaks, B, I named these later, you'll see why in a moment, identify them so I know the chromatogram belongs to what peaks. And the third thing in there, I took the bottom quarter inch of this entire thing and put it out to bring out the noise level. And then it's funny to see, you can see another 51 peaks. So here's a total of 20, 25 peaks. Every one of those, I have a mass spec. So if you know, you have a written sample, you know what that material is. I found dimethylphenolphthalein, I found dimethylphenolphthalein, I found fluorine, I found all kinds of phenolphthaleins. But the most of these things are isophenyls. And it really got turned on about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But the book on simple plant isoquinolines, I put a few fires in the back table to introduce it. It's day. I finished, it's finally been printed about a month ago. It's a listing of the very simple isoquinolines about, I was writing an appendix for the third book with Anne, and I was going to put a little appendix in there on simple isoquinolines from plants. And by the time I got the information compiled in one place, it was over 600 pages of information. And so I decided to do it by itself, which it is. Dull, no sex, no drugs, no excitement, strictly dull. It lists the name of the treatment name of the isoquinoline. I found a way that also has its structures in this kind of neat. It lists the optimization of all the structures, with the plants are in there, the names of the plants. And the very last section of the book gives you the names of all the plants with cost index references. So if you have an interested in an alkaloid that is an isoquinoline or a plant, or a structure, it's in that book, and as I say, there's no excitement in it. I recommend it only if you're one of the few people in the world who'd be interested in that particular thing, but there's a brochure back there if you want to read about it. What I did, where am I?
Sasha, where's the book available?
We have this Transform Press, but that gives the mailing address for the press. Mm-hmm. And the number of suppliers of stock. Where am I? Interesting, the first picture is an actual picture of the mass spec of that major peak. And it shows you the extreme parallel between K is the number K, that's the big peak on the what's seen on the first of the four. And what it is, that's a mass spectrum that came out, that was recorded in a third of a second. And when I had a feeling, I looked vaguely familiar, and I went into my files and I found the structure of carnitine and had to make some of the spectrum. So I synthesized carnitine, that's the structure down below here, isoquinolines. with 2 methoxys and 2 methyl groups, straightforward synthesis, made a sample, and the 2 spectra are superimposed. So that later peak is carnitine. That is quite certain. I looked in the literature, 2 people had worked on this particular topic before. They published the compounds they had found, none of them had mentioned carnitine. So what's going on here? Again, is this the right cactus? Is it the right name? Why did they not say what cactus they're using with? So I began snooping around different sources of cactus. I got a sample from Bono, California. I got a sample from Mesa Gardens back in south of Albuquerque. I got a sample from, what's this place with a horrible name up near Ripon? Coots cactus up near Ripon. And you sent me a sample. I got another sample from some other source. And I don't know if it was your sample I ran or the samples from other source, but I have in my lab, one of my lab books here. I did not record the source of the spectrum I ran. I ran the spectrum. Totally different. Totally different. So I'm back into the argument of how do you run the same cactus? How do you know what you have? And so I'm really a little uncomfortable with it. I don't want to say that this is the right cactus. I have a lot of different things. The cactus itself is an unusual thing. They grow 6 or 8 inches in diameter, very fine flutings. They have almost whitish spine with a cast of blue to them. And so you look at it from distance, it looks like it's a blue spine. No, that's right, but it has sharp spines that kind of curl in like claws. And it has a bluish white appearance. So I got samples from Boots, I got samples from Mesa, and I've been running them also, different spectrum. I'm keeping a reference sample of each plant. So if anything really push comes to shove, I can say, this is the plant I ran, but the trouble I'm not even sure those are valid. So basically I'm getting off into strange territory. I'm beginning to believe that the idea of trying to find all these active material in cacti is looking at the wrong thing. In my feeding my own direction, I'm going in a little bit right now. I think the cactus is, I don't think I can explain why a cactus is that. It tastes, for example, this carnitine. I took it up to 100 milligrams, and I'm now hesitant at 100 milligrams, because it is known to be a bactericide and bacteriostatic, which doesn't bother me at all. But in some animals, it's also convulsant, which does bug me a little bit. And I'm not quite sure if I really want to go any higher. I don't turn on by convulsant. But also, what is an interesting point is it has to be a tremendously good monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And I'm wondering, both of these little pieces in this thing are acequinolines. Some of them are very effective monoamine oxidase inhibitors. I have run a mixture of this through a general screen, very effective deamination inhibition. And I'm wondering, I asked Jonathan if I could steal a word potentially from him, and he said sure. And so I coined the word, thank you, Jonathan. Are you here, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, the cacti wasp, you use spiral wasp, you use all kinds of different wasps. So I have the term cacti wasp, which I think is a mixture of alkaloids that contains phenethylamines, and these are not phenethylamines in this particular cactus, that themselves are known not to be active. And they contain acetylamines that are known to inhibit the contamination of these phenethylamines. And I have a feeling you're going to get in a situation in which you're not going to find an active compound, but you're going to find an active cactus, because it contains at least 2 compounds. Let's say, make a simple 2 compounds, one of which is deaminated and hence is not active, and the other of which inhibits that deamination. So either cactus takes 1 compound, you turn on. Either compound alone, you get very much like ayahuasca in combination of DMT and harmony. So that is where this one is kind of going. So what I want to do with the cactus now is not to try to identify why they're active, but really pursue what's in them. And let this be a clue as the kind of direction for synthetic things to go into. I've let them synthesize 20, 30, 40 of these isoquinolines. I have a very good friend in Virginia, the state of Virginia, who has a marvelous monoamine oxidase inhibition assay, A's and B's. And so I'm sending him 10 at a time, and he's running them all through. And we find, for example, methylene dioxide is much more potent than dimethoxy. It's not. Both methyl groups not. So you get these clues, and I'm going to synthesize 10 more, I suppose, with the active thing here, the active thing that could vary the degree of aromaticity, find that things are active, that maybe one more pass, keeping those active aromaticity thing in there, and maybe vary the position of the methoxy groups or the methoxy groups, variations like that. I'll make it 3 passes with his help. And I'm going to come up with a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. It's going to be in a cactus similar. And it's going to be an active compound. It's going to be a potent inhibitor. And if nothing else, that itself might be an interesting experimental research tool. So this is kind of explaining not into the cactus more the idea of finding what's in there, getting ideas, different kinds of groupings that might be on there, and it's a fascinating area. What I'm going to talk about tomorrow, whenever the next talk is getting back in the laboratory again, because the other thing that is a really very much my dedication to cacti as a primary target is the fact that I've come across a whole new bunch of ideas. And in these tryptamine ideas are a whole bunch of activities. Someone asked me, I've had someone ask just outside, do you have a permit? I think it's from Germany. Do you have a permit to do this kind of work? I said, I don't see why you need a permit. Well, these are illegal drugs. Yeah, here's what it is. These are illegal drugs. No, they're not. Well, are they in the law? No, I'm just now making them. There is a 4-year, I'm making around 4-year delay between making a new compound finance activity. And then 4 years down the line, the DEA gets around to scheduling it, and you get that problem. I got a 4-year lead. And I'm going to keep that going ahead that way. It's too illegal. I don't have an illegal drug in my lab. As soon as they schedule something, I throw my record sample away. There's no problem there. But the whole beauty of this whole area is actually, I cannot begin to explain the joy, the pleasure, the absolute joy of making new compounds. Compounds never made some of these babies I've spent many baby for, and then once you make the one, maybe that wasn't a cactus, maybe it's not. It's itself the theoretical picture of having a cycle in a nice petri dish in your lab. You just made the thing, you know it's right. Spec on it, you get red on everything, absolutely right, it has the right pH and then analysis, everything's in order, everything looks beautiful. And you're looking at a white solid, you say, nobody has ever made this before. It's not in the literature. And I will make it that it's never made. Maybe in yonder galaxy somewhere there's a chemist who made that up. But keep it on Earth. It needs to go actually anywhere on Earth. And you have this little crystal solid out there. You say, but that might be a psychedelic, I'm not right, entheogenic. I haven't liked the term psychedelic. We cross swords occasionally, Jonathan. But that's okay. And this may be a psychedelic. How are you going to find out? You're going to put, but how much do you do? What's your first piece? What analogy do you draw from what you know in your literature and so forth and say, I think I'll start with synthesis. How much do you determine? You don't know that compound. That compound does not know you. I mean, it's a total alien relationship. The only way you can get into it is by saying, well, let's see. I know something very close to that. It's actually maybe 3, 4, 5, I better start at 100 micrograms. No, I'll start with 1 microgram. If you start at 100 micrograms or 1 microgram, the difference in weight is trivial. But it takes time. But then you have several other things you can assay in between and it works out. And you'll eventually find you get into it's a situation where you cannot lose. Because when you get up to an area where you know what the activity is, now you know the compound is now you, and you have established this little relationship. Dialogue is a strange sort of thing. You're kind of talking to it in a funny way. You sit and hear it like plants, whatever you talk to. You're talking a little bit with it. And you say, I think you are active psychedelic at within 100 and 150 milligrams. And then you cannot lose because you publish that, you put out in the book, you write a book, you put it in the clinical literature, that this is active compound at such and such a level. And some people come up and say, we tried that and it is active. You're right. You're right. You win. Right? There's someone else that come up and try it out and say, it's not active at that level. What did I do wrong? You win. Either way, you've got to win. But that's the beauty of publishing science to stay out there. It's an exciting thing. The idea of just taking something totally unknown, lifting up a rock out in the field and seeing what's crawling under it is one of the most exciting things I can conceive of doing. Because you're seeing something that's never seen before. And this whole area of synthesis of these ice equivalents are just absolutely delightful things to work. They're all crystal solids, or some of them have N oxides, little tricky made, and possibly you get aromatic rings and you get little problems with fluorescence and decay. Some of it you have to be a little careful with some of them, but to a large measure, they're stable. And they are easily handled. And they're all white crystalline solids, which is maybe a bit racist, but that's what I have to do. And one thing on this picture I quite forgot to mention, somewhere I forgot it. You take the third of the four pictures, and you get a very good view of the corner on peak P and Q. And if you look at P, you'll find you can see the little lines going up every 30 of a second like that to the top and down every 30 of a second down to where it becomes Q peak. So you can actually see, now these are a better example. We have little steps going up. Every one of those steps is recorded over a third of a second. And every one of those steps is a separate mass spec. And what you can do with mass spec is actually harness is take a peak that comes out like this and check every single step on that peak. And sometimes you find that the spectrum going up is different than the spectrum coming down. There's two compounds that happen to come out almost at the same time. Instead of you have two compounds, you only thought you had one. The other thing you can do is well, thank goodness for the computers and machines. I mean, if you have actually $60, $80, $100,000, I recommend you get one of these machines. They're beautiful things to play with. We now have what they call a triple quant. We have one over at the General Hospital in San Francisco. Instead of being a mass spec with a quadruple, it's three mass specs in essence in a row. All running the same sample all at the same time. About $1/3 we only have, what, we have two now. Thank you, government grants and other people who would help. But what it is, you can put a sample in there, and you can actually write this liquid chromatography, not gas chromatography. So you can run salt, you can run quaternary salt, you can run things that are not volatile, you get them through the sort of thing. Phil and I have painted over there, he ran a beautiful, beautiful example. We've always had a sort of an axiom that we've always found: nicotine is everywhere. I mean, you can take a swipe and run this little thing over here and come up with a staggering amount of nicotine. Because somewhere within the last few months, someone's smoked in here. And that nicotine is on this, on that, it's everywhere. So he was running on the triple quant, which has pretty good resolution, but superb for jet nanograms. You're down to the picos and below, with that kind of sensitivity. Really gorgeous. And he was running a sample of serum, and he was not looking at nicotine, but at cocaine, which is a major metabolite of nicotine. And he's running a sample of a plasma sample down through the things, getting beautiful down to very small levels. Down, when he got near down at the bottom of the picogram area, it got a little bit noisy. This is not very good. Currently, he gave up and they had 10 picograms per annum, something like that. And so he tried something else. The plasma sample deteriorated down around 5 or 10 picograms per ml. I said, then on pure insight, just pure look, on imagination, on creating a marvelous thing to find. He had back in the lab some tetradural proteins, which are sampled with 4 hydrogens in deuterium, so it has a mass of 4 or more. And that's identical for all intents and purposes, resolution, chromatography, everything else. Spectroscopy, except its form mass is heavier. And he spiked a clean plasma sample with this tetradural protein, ran through the mass spectrometry. That's beautiful. So tetradural is not out in nature. So somewhere 18 years ago, someone who's smoking a cigar happened to spit into the solids, in the solid factory that were buying super pure solids, and those solids are loaded with cocaine. And so you're just getting a baseline because it's anywhere. So I think back in the marvelous sample, the example was given some time ago of you have money, you have paper money, guess what's up? They said, when you prove there's cocaine, all paper money has cocaine. This was established first by the DEA, surprisingly enough. They don't talk much about it, but all the laboratories verified it. All paper money has cocaine on it. All paper money has methamphetamine on it. So if you want to be arrested for possession of the drug, they all look at your paper money and you're dead. On the other hand, everybody else's money, banks, this, what have you, has cocaine, has methamphetamine, has all these things on the paper money. And the idea, the analyses are now so sensitive, so extremely sensitive, that you can't get baselines that are zero anymore. You always get something. And it turns out to be pretty much what you're looking for. So the idea of looking for traces, you did it. Tell me, I think who was talking about that? You're talking about MB, where you find morphine as a metabolite in animals. Japan has a law that any trace of morphine should be considered a drug class. If you have a hamburger, you add morphine positive, and therefore you're against the law in Japan. That's how sensitive you can see these things in minuscule, actually minuscule levels. The analyses are so extremely sensitive that they, in essence, are worthless. Basically. And that's not very nice. But that's the way it is. I'm open for questions. Who has questions? Someone raise a hand. Someone. Oh, that brings up a classic one. Same. For his name, he's down in Utah. He is the one who is one of the two sources of cryptones being in cactus. And people want to ask me, are there any cryptones in cacti? Well, there are two things. His paper, wasn't a paper. There's a person named Bai, who's an anthropologist, who published an article on the Tarahumara Indians and their little cacti, what's in them. It was published in 1960-something, in the early late 60s, early 70s. And he said, we have found a peyote, and in the Tarahumara, this is the northern part of Mexico, just down in Sonora, over in, what's it called, those dogs that have state names after them. So that part of Mexico, the Tarahumara is there. Use the word peyote, not for what we know as peyote, but for any small cactus that has medical use. You have to be very careful of the use of the term peyote in northern Mexico. Down in central Mexico, down along the Huicho and all that thing, it's routinely the peyote cactus. In the Tarahumara, it's any small cactus that has medical action. And he had this, and he advised, said he ran a color test on it, looked at the color test. My opinion, this is a tryptamine. And so it went into Guy's paper as being a tryptamine in this particular cactus. I forget, the Ariocarpus or something or other. In this particular cactus, there was a tryptamine reference personal communication. And I know him well enough to know that he had found a tryptamine in cactus. I give him between 3 and 4 weeks before that appeared in some journal somewhere. He's very, he wants to be in front of everything, and he is wrong in front of it. It never appeared. And so I contacted one of my other allies in Purdue and found that he had not published it. So he had moved to Utah and moved to Utah. And I said, whatever happened to that tryptamine you found in cactus? Is one of the two reports in the literature of tryptamine in cactus. He said, well, it turned out to be an imbecile. It wasn't tryptamine at all. So that took care of one. There's another issue, the first edition of Hoffman and Schultz book on the plants and hallucinogenics, whatever the name of the thing is, had N-dimethyl, had DMT as being a component of cactus dimethyltryptamine. And that was the other one. They had some sort of a reference, but it wasn't a final reference, again, a communication of some kind. The second edition of the book, the same place, those 2 pages had just been removed. It was not in the second edition at all. So I got hold of Hoffman and said, what are you changing your mind here? What's going on here? Well, he said that was a kind of an interesting mistake. He said what it is the secretary who's typing it got as far as the N-dimethyl, and she had DMT on her mind, and she just wrote it tryptamine. Actually, it's N-dimethyl. And so that's the second appearance of tryptamines in cactus that was tracked down. Except the fact that I found vanillin, but a lot of friends in one cactus. I don't really know of any documented tryptamines anywhere in any cactus species. They may well be there. I mean, things like tryptophan amino acids don't count. I mean, alkaloids are tryptamines. I see it.
Is it possible that where the different cacti, which are the same cacti, if there's different chemicals in the soil, that you will get something different in the different cacti, or is that just way out?
Not possible, it's almost a certainty. These are things I was showing someone earlier about my friend David Leckie down in, he just got a job down in the hills of San Francisco. It's a scientist that really, he's a chemist on there, well, I published a lot with him. He's a master of tryptamine synthesis. Almost all my synthetic skills in tryptamine I've learned from him. He had been growing in the back of his backyard the acacia Deliana. This is in the Bay Area, the acacia that in the springtime you don't see any green leaves because it's solid yellow. That little pinpoint blossom that makes the whole tree yellow, then the yellow drops, you see the green leaves, that's a nice tree. And he in the backyard gathered leaves from that thing in the spring and the summer and the fall. Put them all in the freezer. The next year he worked them all up at the same time in the same way to see what the DMT levels were. And in one of the samples, which it is, it's all been published, he found DMT at a very high level, almost no other alkaloids, with a little bit of harmine and harmony. A second sample had heavy harmine and harmony, but no visible DMT. And the third sample has no alkaloids at all. The same trees, same cover, same sleeper, same freezer, certain times of the year. Yeah, one of the beautiful examples of that is still in the name of I forgot his name. Senior Moon. He is looking at a plant in the Orinoco, down in South America, and it's a plant that was used to help snap blood flow off after childbirth, and they had this growing over here, and then Vitradino, I guess all these people went, turned down with really helpful. So this is a plant that is supposed to confirm and save many lives in childbirth. And he said, I'd like an example of this plant. It's the same plant, I know. This plant doesn't work, this plant does work. It's the same plant. Impact. So he had to take samples from both plants. You sample both plants, and this way I learned the term endophyte. I've never heard the term before. This came up. And he took these plants back with him to his lab back where it was in the United States somewhere. And he ran both of them, and it turned out one of them was one of ergots. And the other two were even avoiders. Same plant. Exactly the same plant. But it turns out the weak one ergot had something called endophyte. Inside the plant, the ergot isn't there, it's not visible. In the blossom, the ergot is there, but in the blossom you can't see it. The seed contains it, but it's inside the seed, you can't see it. You plant the seed, you have a new plant, you don't see the ergot. At no point is that ergot visible outside of the plant. Because one mark has this one worked, this one did not. So you have this kind of thing that can make identical plants.
I think of the shaman as entering into this net of being in the higher worlds, in the heaven worlds, and that's why I've personified the net of being, this painting behind us, as this continuum of heads interlocking infinitely in all directions, because that points to being as a continuum, as a network, in a sense, to an infinite realm. And this is a part of the deep fabric of our being, I think, because we sense ourselves as souls related to many.